You are listening to episode number 34 of Meet the Thriller Author. I am your host, Alan Peterson, and in this episode of the podcast, we'll be meeting John W. Mefford, who is an Amazon Top 50 author, number 2 best-selling author over on Barnes & Noble, and a reader's favorite gold medal winner. John writes action-packed, suspenseful thrillers with great characters, a lot of intrigue and twists, so it's fun to talk to him about his prolific schedule and a lot more, so I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. One warning, I had a cold during this interview, so my apologies. I think I cut out most of the sniffling, but a couple of them might have snuck through, so I apologize for that. And just a reminder to check out our sponsor for this podcast. It's Audible, and you can go download a free audiobook and learn more about their free offer over at audibletrial.com/MTTA. I appreciate your support, and here is the episode number 34. John, how are you doing?
Doing great. How are you doing, Alan?
I'm doing all right. Got a little cold, but it's all right. I'll survive.
Yeah. Hope you feel better, but yeah, those are not fun to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. So could you tell us a little bit about your background, please, and about your books?
Well, that's a loaded question. I'm 51 years old, so I have a lot of both. Background goes into a lot of different areas. I actually was a journalist right out of college, and I think that probably got my my writing curiosity piqued to a degree. And then I did various other careers, got into the IT field for over 2 decades. But the gnawing question was always nibbling at the back of my mind, and that was, could I write a mystery thriller? I've always loved mystery thrillers, whether it be, as a little kid, I loved the mystery thriller cartoons. Growing up, I read all the Hardy Boys books that elevated into other types of books, of course, Grisham and Patterson and so forth. I loved all the movies, related TV programs, you name it. And I think in the back of my mind, I always wondered, could I do that? Could I create a story that was compelling enough to last 300 pages? I gave it a whack about, it's been now 7 years ago when I sat down to write my first novel. And of course, if anybody's tried to give this a go, when you write your first one, you think you've climbed Mount Everest and hit the pinnacle of success, but that's just the first draft of about 100 for the first book. And that was quite an interesting experience in and of itself, but that then led to many other things, and it's a long path, but now I've basically gotten to a point where I've just published my 16th thriller about a week or so ago, and already have plans for my next series for next year.
Wow, that's fantastic. So 16 books in the past 7 years.
And actually most of that's focused in the last 3 or 4 years. So I basically wrote the first book, didn't really know what I was doing from a marketing perspective or kind of the broader picture of where I wanted to take it. While I did start writing the second book, I didn't really have a great vision of what the industry was all about. And as you're probably aware, the industry was changing a great deal then, still is now. And, work got in the way, family, responsibilities and all that. But I started getting a better idea of what I wanted to be when I grew up, so to speak, a few years ago. And I started being more serious about the business side of it, applying a lot of the things I learned in the real business world to my author world, my author business. And that's when I started thinking big picture about, plots and story arcs and how I could grow as an author and how things could really materialize. So I'd say most of the 16 thrillers have been really the work of working about 80-hour weeks here the last 3 years.
Oh wow! Yeah, just to get the writing done, amazing.
Yeah.
Was that the Alex Trout series? The one that you're working on right now, or was that your first series?
Well, so my first series was actually called the Greed series. My first book was called something different. That's when I went back to the drawing board and said, I'm going to rewrite that a little bit. I'm going to make it the first book of the Greed series. It was Fatal Greed. And whenever you write your first book, it's like the first of anything. It's something that will never leave you. So it always has a special place in the heart. That was a 4-book series, and then I moved from that into the Booker series, which is a series about a PI here in Dallas and a multiracial PI. And it's kind of funny, interesting anyway, to look at all the events that have happened here in the U.S. anyway in the last couple of years and how appropriate this particular character is and this series is, I think, in kind of the landscape of what's going on in America. And he's really one of those characters that is flawed, but you end up really pulling forward and you love. So the Booker series, I have a lot of fans of the Booker series. That's a 6-book series. They all came out in 2015. And then I really had the desire to do something somewhat different. And I thought to myself, I need a new challenge. I want to think of something a little bit bigger. And the idea of me coming up and thinking of a character that is a female lead came to my mind. And I ran it by a couple of my folks, what I call my beta readers, and they're the 4 or 5 folks that read each of my novels before anybody else sees them. After my editor and I finish all the editing process, and it was actually after I wrote the very first Alex Trout thriller, At Bay, and he actually read it and he was like, "This is an incredible story. If I didn't know you had written it, John, I would absolutely love it. But it's hard for me to get past the John writing as a female lead, with a female lead." He goes, "I'm used to John writing about guys doing kick-ass things, and kick-ass plots." And it actually kind of threw me at first because I'm like, wow, he's one of my, cherished readers. He loves everything I do. And I was like, is this how it's going to be received out in the public? And so I was very worried and concerned for a few weeks. And then after a while, I just said, I've kind of, like everything else I've done in this world, I've kind of just gone for it. I do my homework, I work my tail off, and then there's a time to just kind of let it sail. And that's what I did. And it's really been a great experience for me. It isn't that I don't have male characters, of course, in these books. It just so happens that I hit a thread here, I think, with this particular character in Alex Trout. She's an FBI agent, but more than anything, she's a mom, she's a wife. She has a background, she has a personal life, she has a lot of things going on. And really, when that first book picks up, there's a lot of things that have already happened to her, and she has to try to figure them out because she's lost most of her memory. And so there's a lot of things going on within that first book, At Bay, around what's going on. How does the professional life connect to the personal life? How did she get to this point where she lost her memory? How does all this come together in the middle of this case that she's been put on, although she's not officially on it because she's supposed to be on leave of absence because of her memory issues. And then how it all connects in this kind of, reverberating way in her life. So that was the first book in the Alex Trout series.
And then I read when I was reading about your background that you're ending the Alex Trout series, or is it just for a little bit while you work on this next series?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So
because it's so popular, I'm like, why would you end it?
Yeah. Well, you have to, you probably have to write books to a degree in advance of when they're released, and you have to have a bit of a plan out there. So when I was, even just a couple of books into the Alex Trout thriller series, I could see, yes, it was connecting with readers. There's no doubt about that. But I actually had a grander plan. And the plan is that I basically created what I'm calling the Redemption Thriller Collection. And so if you think about that at a high level, that's the umbrella collection that's going to include the Alex Trout thriller series and then some other thriller series underneath that overall collection. And here's the real kicker, is that while each series can be read standalone, they're all ultimately going to connect. So I'm going to have, the plan is right now, so I have Alex Trout, the Alex Trout thriller series that's come out this year, all 6 books. Next year is going to be the Ivy Nash thriller series. Now, if you can see the trend here, Alex Trout is the At series, At Bay, At Large, At Once, so forth and so on. And the Ivy Nash series is, of course, with her acronym of her name, IN. The first book is In Defiance, and that releases in early January. And the other books in the series are In Pursuit would be book 2, if I can go off memory here, In Doubt, book 3, Break In is book 4, book 5 is In Control, and book 6 is In the End. So I've already mapped out the high-level plots for each book. I'm actually finished writing the first draft of the first 3 books. I'm starting the 4th book of that series next week. And then I have plans for another series, and it's going to be the On series. So there'll be a character I'll reveal that will fulfill the O in the end, and it will not be, they will not have the last name of Nash like Ivy does. And then right now the plan is to have a fourth series, which would be another 6 books in the Alex Trout series. So it's actually would be books 7 through 12. And that's where I plan on, as of now, connecting all the plots for all of the books and all the main characters all together in one, steamrolling, high voltage, real exciting last 6 books.
Wow, that is exciting. You have like a big long-term business plan or writing plan. That's amazing. Do you? So you must have, like you already said, you've already plotted a lot of them. So you do like a detailed outline, or what's your writing process?
The writing process for the individual books is a little bit different, of course, for the overall. So what I just described to you was basically the plan for the overall Redemption Thriller collection. And so I had to have an idea as to high-level characters, where I wanted the plot to go, if and how the plots could connect, or at least that kind of a connecting thread between Series 1, Series 2, Series 3, and then the final 6 books. Now, how I approach writing individual books is a little bit different. Now, when I create a series, I create at least the high-level plots for each of the books in the series, just so I have a clue about where we're going with this character, where we're going with the supporting characters. What are the general plots? When does it make sense to do a plot like this, and then to kind of go over to a plot that's a little bit different on this side of the house, and then ultimately end it in a fashion where I'm comfortable with where the character is, comfortable with what the character and the other characters have experienced. Have I gotten everything out of them that I want to get out of them? That allows the readers to get the the best possible thriller experience, and then of course, how does it set up for the next series? So now, when you look at each individual book, because I basically already have that high-level plan, then I can dig down a little bit deeper here before I start each of the books and start mapping out things a little bit more detailed. Now, I've kind of toyed with a lot of different things. Earlier on, this is kind of strange. Some people get more detailed in their plotting as they go forward in their career. I've been a little bit of the opposite. Now, probably because I have this very rigid production schedule and I'm working 80 hours a week and I don't have a lot of downtime. When I'm not writing, I'm providing an edit response back to my editor, or I'm doing research, or I'm doing a little marketing, or interviews like this, or what have you. But I basically have enough confidence in myself now that as I start and I have a good idea about the general plot lines that I want to outline and to delve further into at each book, and where I want the characters to go, and if I have an idea of the first chapter and where I want to end it, generally where I want to end it, then I pretty much just take off. And the first go around, if I can get the first attempt at the first chapter, if I can get 500, 1,000 words or so down on paper, I get that 2, 3, 4 pages into the book, I start feeling it, and then from there it's just kind of a snowball effect, and the rest is, I wouldn't call it magic. I would just call it incredibly hard work.
Yeah, it sounds like it. 8 hours a week. That's amazing. That's very good discipline and focus. Do you have like a word count goal that you set for yourself every day?
Well, yes and no. So I used to be, once again, I think when I probably wasn't quite as confident what as I could achieve. Well, I wasn't sure exactly how I could map it all together. So earlier on, I was more rigid about, okay, you must get to this many words. I think now I'm more confident, I guess, at least in the schedule. So the way my editor and I work together, the way we work with our proofreader, the way I work with all these folks, my cover design, my cover artist, and everybody else, we now got a pretty good method in place here. So I allow things to overlap a little bit. So I generally have probably about a 2,000 word count per day. I'd say is about the average. Could be a little bit more, 2,250, 2,500, depending on the day. And at times, of course, I'll exceed that, especially when I'm getting close to the end. The middle part of a book is the toughest part because, you've done a lot of work. Your brain's a little tired. You got to keep going ahead. You got to continue creating compelling storylines and really providing different twists and turns, yet somehow allowing it all to connect in the end. So that's the toughest part. But that last bit, that last week, I'm probably writing 3,500, 4,000 words a day. And I usually end up ending a little bit sooner than what I thought just because it's just kind of a whirlwind. It's like I'm just on skis, just flying downhill.
It's the mad dash towards the end.
Yes.
And do you what do you use to write? You use like Word or like a Scrivener software or something like that?
I've heard about a lot of things. I've read about a lot of different things like Scrivener and Vellum and so forth. But I'll be honest, when I first started writing my first novel, there's a lot of things I could have looked up about how to do this and how I could do this, but I knew all that it would do is depress me. So I sat down, I looked up one thing to me at the time that I thought was important. It's not important anymore. And that was, how many words does it take to make up a book page? Because I was just a reader at the time. Now, I'd written a lot of articles in the newspaper before because I was a journalist. So I'd done a lot of writing, but I'd never written a book. In my mind, I thought, I needed an idea of how many words it took to, read one page, and that was 300. So I said, okay, just how I now have an idea, and opened up a Word document, and I put TBD title, and then I started writing. And of course, I've learned a lot since then, gone to conferences since then, learned a lot online, have a lot of good author friends. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Just me and MS Word and making it easy as possible.
Yeah, whatever works for the individual. But yeah, that's really cool that you get this whole world going that way. And like you say, you just started with a blank page, just like everybody else. That's pretty cool. You mentioned your journalism background. I've always been curious about this because a couple of my favorite authors, like Michael Connelly and John Sanford, all were journalists. Did you find that training has helped you as a writer?
Immensely.
I would imagine.
Yes. Yeah, no doubt. I think if I hadn't have had that journalistic background, I probably wouldn't have had the guts to even give it a shot. And even though it's very different types of writing, of course, when you're writing for a newspaper, the stories are much shorter. You have the lead at the top typically. It's just get right to the point. It's very succinct. I mean, some of that can carry over to the book world about being succinct, but there's only so many descriptors you can put into a newspaper article. You got to tell the story and get over and get out. And I think one of the things that taught me was working hard, was writing on deadline, being able to really, even though I'm an indie author, it's being able to collaborate with the right set of folks. In the newspaper world, you're trying to get information from various folks to help you make the best possible story. You collaborate with fellow writers, with photographers, that type of thing. I do the same thing with my cover artist. I have a great relationship with him, even though he's down in New Zealand. Yeah, New Zealand. So, it's just a lot of life lessons I think anybody would pick up from, and having that journalism background is, I remember those days so well because you kind of wonder, am I going to be doing this forever? You kind of question, where am I going with my life? I did like it in some respects. In fact, I loved it. But you kind of wonder, where does it go from here? And I didn't know that I'd weave through the IT field for over 2 decades, and before I really figured out I was meant to be a writer again.
Full circle.
Exactly.
Yeah, you mentioned your cover artists. Your covers are just amazing. I'm just looking at them. I was like, wow. It's like, very, very, very nice work on that. And I like how you kept the branding of yourself. Is that something that you plotted out as well? How you're going to brand covers?
Very conscious of that. And Jaron is my cover artist. I mean, he's really kind of the leader of that area. And so he listens to my feedback and he makes adjustments. But, he comes up with these ideas of, hey, let's continue the type of, same type of imagery, same types of fonts, that types of thing, so we can keep that branding from series to series, especially now that we're in the Redemption Thriller collection. So I have the Alex Trout series and Defiance and the Ivy Nash series. You can see some similarities there. The fonts are the same. Of course, we have the same type of titling going on. And so he was very conscious about trying to make that as just smooth as possible.
And was it jarring for you to go from writing Alex Trout to Ivy Nash, or is it pretty much you just gotta switch and go?
Once I came up with the idea of who Ivy Nash was and how she and the series would ultimately connect to Alex, it was actually really, really cool. So I won't tell you how they're connected yet, because that's something that will come out over time in the next couple of years as I write the future series. But their inspiration for Ivy Nash, the character, was a very personal one here in Texas. So here in the last, I think as a writer or journalist or anybody in this field, your antenna, your eyes, and your ears are always open and listening to everything that goes on around you. Everything is fodder for a book, whether it be real or imagined or whatever. And here in Texas, in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of stories written about the Child Protective Services Agency, and it's been very difficult to read all these stories about kids being basically falling through the holes of the system, and the CPS agents not getting to address the kids with the biggest issues, not just for weeks but months. And so I really started thinking, okay, I write mystery thrillers. This issue is just tugging at my mind. How can I create a book or a series that kind of delves into these issues? And so I can say this about Ivy. Ivy herself was a system baby. She grew up in 17 foster homes. She has quite a background, quite a bit different background than Alex. Ivy lives in San Antonio. She was a foster child there for, like I said, through 17 foster homes, all growing up. None of them didn't have great experiences throughout the whole way, but now we open up the first book, and she is now a CPS agent herself. And so as a CPS agent, she gets to experience it from the other side, where after everything that she's been through, she's desperately trying to make the best situation for the kids. And that's ultimately what it's about in her mind. Trying to make the world a better place for the kids, trying to get through all the BS and all the bureaucracy to make the world better for an individual kid that she deals with through her particular role there as a special investigator for the CPS. So there's a lot that goes on with her life, of course, because there's so much that's happened in her background. So this is a little bit of a grittier series, I'd say, although Alex definitely has some gritty parts. Believe me, you read that first book, I think everybody would be hard-pressed not to, almost have a heart attack a couple times. But Ivy's different, she's a little bit more of a loner. Alex has a built-in family. Ivy grew up as a foster child. She doesn't have the family, not immediate, at least not a blood family. So there's definitely some differences there. And once I figured out who she was and what she was all about, it's been a completely different experience. She's been great to write about, and I've had a lot of fun delving further into her life. And she has other supporting characters around her that are really interesting as well.
And do you put in a lot of research for each book, or do you do like the bigger series type of research before you delve in?
A little bit of both. So before I started the Alex Trout series, when I had the vision of Alex Trout in mind, I was fortunate enough to speak with the folks in D.C. With the FBI, and they allowed me to set up a in-person interview for me to interview with an FBI agent, female FBI agent here in Dallas. So I went down to the FBI office and interviewed her and their media relations person, and they gave me a tour of their huge building, some artifacts, some things going back, in time. I think they were very, very helpful. And they understood I'm writing fiction. It's going to be fake. It's not the real world, but it's just nice to be able to have the foundation of understanding how the FBI operates, what's realistic, what's not. Of course, their job is typically a lot more boring than how it's portrayed in books and movies, but they're reader fans as well. In fact, the director of the FBI had asked to read a couple of my books, so I sent a couple hard copies up to him a few months ago.
Oh, that's the Comey? Or what's this? Oh, yes, that's awesome. That's kind of exciting.
It is kind of cool.
And where do you usually write? Do you have like a dedicated office space, or do you go to the coffee shop or anything like that?
I would say all the above. I do most of my writing here in the office, which is where I'm doing the interview right now. There's a couple windows out here that I look out of. There's a tree out there and some bushes, and just seeing the outside world helps a little bit. I do occasionally go to bookstores, things of that nature, just to kind of get out in the public. I don't want to be distracted too much. As long as I can view it all as kind of white noise, I'm good. I don't mind hearing noise as long as nobody's like really blaring in my ear. Some people actually like to listen to music or things like that. I don't like doing that, but I like having. Frankly, I write all the time. So like we'll be on vacation and I'm writing, or I'll be on the airplane and I'm writing. So wherever I have my computer, I can write.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about it. Yeah, as long as you have your computer, you you can get some writing done.
Exactly.
What keeps you going then with your writing? I mean, I could tell that you love it. So like, I mean, is that a big motivator for you to keep going? And you got all these fans now waiting for your next books, or what gives you the mojo to keep going?
I think when you've done something that you've not really liked to do for so many years, and then you finally get another chance in life to say, what do you really want to do? And you get to define it. And then you slowly learn it, you pick it up, and you feel like you're getting better and better, and you're getting that affirmation from readers and fans, and you see the readership growing, and a lot of more people buying it, a lot more people, interacting with me through email and reviews and Facebook and you name it. Yeah, it's all kind of all connected, and it's not really something I would have predicted when I was younger, certainly, but life is one of those things it kind of happens. Even if you think you have a plan, it typically goes differently. And I was just glad I wasn't stubborn enough to ignore something that I felt compelled to do, and felt like I thought I could probably do it pretty well. And it's turned out pretty well. I haven't figured out, I haven't written the perfect novel yet, that's for sure. It's always a learning, growing process. And I guess that's part of the challenge is, can I always write this book that I'm getting ready to start better than my last?
And I see that In Defiance is already on pre-order, so for listeners.
Yes, it's actually on pre-order. It's interesting about how pre-orders work. So I got In Defiance set up as a pre-order on Amazon. On other retailers, I'm able to get out pre-orders more in advance than that. So I have, on the iBooks platform of Apple, you can put out pre-orders a year in advance. So I actually have all 6 books out there for pre-order on iBooks. Oh. Barnes & Noble, I have the first 3 books, In Defiance, In Pursuit, and In Doubt out there.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize there was that Amazon was different from the other ones. I didn't realize.
Yep.
I didn't realize iBooks could go a year. Wow.
Yeah, they're really focused on that. Amazon just gives you 3 months for right now, anyway.
How often are you going to be publishing then for the next books? What's your schedule?
So it's a similar schedule I had to here in 2016. The first book comes out January 6th. Excuse me, and then after that. Books 2 through 6 will be out every 2 months. So it'll be book 2 in March, book 3 in May, book 4 in July, book 5 in September, book 6 in November. And there's actually a possibility of a couple other things. So I'm actually working on a box set with some other thriller authors we might be putting out next year. And then there's another co-authoring project that is a possibility with a author friend of mine who's a New York Times bestselling author. And I'm very excited about the possibility. We haven't nailed down exact plans, but I'm hopeful to also squeeze that in next year.
Ah, yeah, you put most of the authors to shame, including myself. Fantastic schedule. And do you still, with all that, you're so busy, do you still find time to read thrillers?
I do. Yes, I have to read a little bit every night. It just is a way of calming me. It's kind of like my way of, okay, I'm slowing down. I'm not going to think nonstop about my books and my story arcs and my plots and characters and all these other things that are going through my mind, which is pretty much with me every waking moment of the day. It's my moment. It's a few minutes to wind down for 15, 20 minutes. And it's just nice to read somebody else's work and just to experience something else for a change. But yeah, I read pretty much every night.
And I noticed that, just to let the listeners know, that if on your website you have a couple free books.
I do. I really value and cherish the relationship I have with readers, and by them signing up to my email list, that's my way of being able to interact with them on a more personal level. And so to get them to sign up, I offer up the first book in the Greed series and the first book in the Booker series for free right now. It's a kind of a limited time thing. It may not be there forever, but for right now it's there. They go out to the website, they can click on it, and they'll sign up, be on my email list. They'll get those first 2 books. And then they'll be able to find out about all the cool things going on in my author career. Every time a new book comes out, every time I have a good deal or an occasional giveaway, things like that, they'll be a part of it.
All right, cool. I'll definitely have a link to that on the website. For the listeners, the site is johnwmefford.com. So they can.
Yes, I always say I'm the other W from Texas. That's the way of putting it, because I throw in that W as the middle initial.
Oh, yeah, so everyone knows it's the W.
Yeah, and the reason that people, well, why did you go with the middle initial? Actually, I went with it because when I tried to get the domain name for johnmefford.com, thrillingrreads.com years ago. Somebody else had it, and they weren't using it. And I tried to buy it from them. They wouldn't even reply to my email. So I'm like, what can I do? I probably should have gone with something more original like johnmeffordbooks.com, but I just thought, I'm going to throw out that middle initial out there. And I probably had Grisham on my mind because I'd read a lot of Grisham when I was in my 20s, and all of his lawyers had like middle initials or initial for a first name, like H. Ross Perot or something like that. So
yeah, it sounds like it's a Texas thing then too. H. Ross Perot, W.
Yeah.
Okay, John. Well, before I let you go here, is there anything else you'd like to tell to our listeners? And we have a mix of readers and aspiring writers that listen to the podcast.
Well, I'd say for writers, the best advice I have given to a number of folks who have talked to me offline and through email and the phone and so forth is you've probably heard it before, but I can't overemphasize it enough, and that is just keep writing. I wouldn't sit there and fret over sales day in and day out. You need to learn the business side of it as much as you can, but more than anything, just continue writing and try to do it in a way where you don't feel pressure. Just kind of clear your mind and write as much as you can. Not to where you're brain numb, of course, but just keep writing and look at yourself, kind of in 6-month chunks. Where was I 6 months ago? Where am I now? Where am I going to be in 6 months from now? And just, don't let others define your dream if you do have one. Frankly, for me, I never actually called it a dream. I kind of started down this path without putting a lot of expectations on myself, and then I started setting goals. When I've ever dreamed of something, I always thought it was like one of those, maybe, I dreamed of being in the NBA, right, or in the NFL. I had a goal of some of these goals that I've started to hit. Others I'm still trying to hit. But to me, if it's goal-oriented, that it's something I can map out and eventually hit. For readers, I owe my life to them. I owe my livelihood to them. And the feedback I've gotten up to now has been tremendous, and I love having people read my work. I think that's why anybody who's a creative likes creating. Whether you're a visual artist or a verbal artist or whatever, as long as you have people consume what you're creating, whatever you're creating, whether it be a book, TV show, movie, whatever, having people watch it, listen to it, read it, it's really, and having that great feedback, it's the best feeling in the world. So I appreciate all the readers out there who've read my books, and for those who haven't, I hope you'll have an opportunity to try one of my books.
All right, great. Well said, John. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate the time, Alan. Thank you very much, and I hope you feel better.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Meet the Thriller Author. I'd like to ask you to please review and rate this podcast over on iTunes. It really helps me get the word out. If you take a few seconds of your time to do that, it would be much appreciated. You can also visit my website at thrillingrreads.com/podcast for show notes on this episode, as well as information about the podcast in general. And you can also sign up for my mailing list there. You'll be getting special offers from our guests, as well as information, behind the scenes information on the podcast. And please do visit my author website at alanpeterson.com. I appreciate your support. And so until next episode, I will talk to you then.